Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fedge, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fed, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to SacredMatrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And I'm not sure if we're getting feedback or not, but I'm hearing some strange things, so Sean, you'll have to let us know. But today, we have a very special guest, GeorgeGreen. I'm going to tell you a little bit about George before we pull him onto the show. Let's try that. This mic. Oh, I know what's going on. Will you run this out to the other room, honey? Yeah. There we go. I figured out the source. Okay, GeorgeGreen's career extends from military service in the United States Air Force, where he encountered alien disc craft in a remote hangar at Edwards Air Force Base, through playing Monopoly in corporate banking and large-scale construction to working closely with the Pleiadians, I always have trouble pronouncing that, and other benevolent intelligences to wake people up in preparation for coming changes. Very few people we have talked to have a span of personal experience and contacts, which is this broad. As George describes, he used to run around with the big boys, and he was asked to build an enemy prisoner of war camp in downtown Las Vegas, and he refused. And he was asked to be finance chairman for the Carter administration, but he declined. He declined after it became clear to him that the ethics of many of the senior players were heavily compromised. And shortly after he turned down the offer, his loans were called in, and he lost many millions of dollars as finance was removed from dozens of his major construction projects. So I'm not going to do the whole bio. I'm going to let George tell us a little bit more about himself, how he, like he said, ran around with the big boys, and he came through to his spiritual enlightenment and awakening. So the other thing I want to say is the first half of the show, we're going to explore the dark side of the Force. And then we'll take a commercial break, and we will go into the lighter side and consciousness and spirituality. Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring in George?
Yeah, it's really interesting. In consciousness studies, we say there's that evil basically is disrespect for consciousness. But most people aren't evil. They don't disrespect consciousness. They're just ignorant. And once they start understanding whether consciousness is being stifled or encouraged, they look at things again. And so today, George is somebody who has been in the heart of the beast. He was ignorant at first, but when he saw the way things really were going down, his essence said, no, this is evil, and this gave him purpose in life, which it can to all of us. The evil that bugs us is what gives us purpose to life, and George's purpose has been enlightenment and getting past this evil and respecting the consciousness of everybody, and I am so excited that we have George with us today.
Welcome to our show, George. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're always excited to talk to you.
You want to know how it was a little bit it started and how I got involved with it? Well, you know, people's headlines of the papers today are looking at the stock market dropping 300 points. And they're, you know, just as an illustration. And they're out looking at and seeing what's going on, and they're also looking and reading in the papers how Radio Shack is going to go into bankruptcy, Sears is going into bankruptcy, Kmart is going, all these places, even the Olive Garden, all these things that people are looking at, and they want to understand why and how this is all occurring. And it's all done because of basically the political nature of money, if you want to call it. To give you the little bit more of a background, how I got involved in this game, my dad happened to be one of the largest meat packers in Denver. Now, in the meat packing business, when we go out and buy a load of cattle, for instance, from the farmer, the government has what they call the Packers and Stockyards Act. When we go buy that load of cattle from these people, we have to pay for it in 24 hours. Because you're going to kill or process the animal, it'll be gone. So, which is okay. Then we turn around and we process the animal, but we were out there selling it back to one of the government projects. Well, the government doesn't pay you in 24 hours, and that was how I got involved with the game of monopoly, if you want to call it, the money, because what I would do is go down to the different various banks that we had in Denver, is where I'm from. Anyway, and I would borrow against my accounts receivable from the government. Now, this was what considered, you know, blue chip paper because the government owed us the money. So when I went into the banks, I would assign them the notes receivable, and then they'd give me the money so I could go out and buy more cattle, frankly, and that's how the game worked, and you try to work on the spread. Well, the problem is that the banks at that time could only loan a certain amount of money based on their deposits that they had. Now, I'm sitting with one of the bankers, and I had borrowed to the loan limit of most of the banks in Denver because I was dealing with millions of dollars. But one of the bankers says, you got a bunch of friends with money, why don't you have them come over to our bank and put more money into it, and therefore we'll be able to loan you more money. And I said, that's a good deal. Except for, I said, what's in it? You know, I'm going to tell my buddies with their cash, I'll be acting, you know, like their advertising agency in a way. I says, there's got to be a better way. And I said, let's go look at your books, and I'll find out something. So I'm sitting with the banks, and then I'm looking at the numbers, and I find out if they put in $1 million in the bank can loan out $10 million. They just create $9 more million and loan it out based on the deposits that they have. Well, that's well and good, except for the deposits that were being put in there is like you yourself, you put it in there maybe for 1 year. That's the most you wanted to do it. So on a 1-year certificate, for instance, of deposit, which at that time a private company called FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, it's a corporation that insures the deposits, would guarantee up to $10,000. Well, we put in $10,000, they loan out $100,000. Which is fine, except for when at that time, back when I was doing all this, the banks, all of them, were advertising in big full-page ads. If you put in $10,000, we'll give you a new TV set, or some other kind of, you know, premise. So that would induce them to come in. Well, I looked at all of that, and I said, you guys can keep doing that, but I'm looking and I'm calculating, and it said, look to me, about 3% of their money was being spent for advertising to get to that point. And I said, I got a solution for you. If you'll pay me 3%, I'll put all the money you want into your bank. Well, the banks said, well, how's that going to work? And I said, well, I'll give you more money, then you can loan me more, of course. And so how I got my friends to put the money in the bank, I would write out a check to them in advance for 2%. Now, let me give you an idea. You're a saver. You put your money in the bank. They paid at that time 5% interest on a 1-year certificate. But if I wrote out a check to you in advance for 2%, now 2% of 5 is 40%. I gave you a 40% increase on your returns with no risk whatsoever. I had nothing to do with the bank. I had nothing to do with your money. I just told you what bank to put it in. Doesn't that sound like a pretty good deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, except for here's the problem. You and I become friends in this thing, and you, of course, are a loudmouth. We got a radio program going or a TV or whatever I was, at that time working on it, and you were telling all your friends about this great deal that you found out. So what happened is, all of a sudden, my phones are going off the hook because everybody and all your friends were calling. They wanted to get in on that, quote, extra money that they got without any risk. So that was fine, except for all of a sudden I had millions of dollars coming through my office, and I was designating it into certain banks all over the place. Here's what the problem became. After 1 year, your certificate came up for renewal. Well, the bank wasn't going to pay you any more than what they were. The 5%, that, you got that extra percent for me, so you call me on the phone, you says, George, you're going to pay me again, so I leave it in that bank? And I just happened, because we did this, several other banks were calling me to give me the same deal. So what I do would move all the money that you put into the bank in and just tell you to put it into another one. Now, what do you think that does? That means I had total control of that bank. I could break it. In other words, if I put in $10 million and they loaned out $100 million, if I pulled the $10 million out, there's only two things can happen to the bank. FDIC would have to liquidate the bank, or the Federal Reserve would advance the money to it. So you can understand how powerful I was becoming, and yet I had nothing to do with it. Now, the next game happened to this, so I got an understanding of this, and I want to make sure that your listeners understand a little bit about the game. First thing happened is, the state of Colorado called me and they said, what you're doing, we've been instructed that you got to have a license. And I says, a license for what? And they said, well, you're selling money. And I said, well, indirectly, I guess you could say that. And they said, we're instructed to give you a license. And I said, hey, I studied law at the University of Illinois. I studied engineering at College School of Mines. I love exams. I says, bring it on. And they said, well, we don't know what to do because we never had this before. I said, that's not a problem. Anyway, one of my friends was State Senator Peter Dominic. I talked to him and I says, get me the accounting book for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. And I said, I'll go over this and we'll see if we can get some kind of solution to this. So I received the document. It's about 3 inches thick. And in it, the first thing I wanted to go to, which was, what's the definition of money? Now, believe it or not, they don't have one. So if they cannot identify, in other words, the International Monetary Fund, who's playing with money, can identify what the definition of money is, how can the state license me? You understand what the problem is there? Well, so the next thing happened then is I went down to the state and I said, I got a solution for you. I says, and then I gave them the books, and your listeners, if they really contact me, I'll be glad to send them a copy, 1 or 2 pages of that so they can read it for themselves. But anyway, what happened is I discussed this with the state of Colorado, and I said, to me, as far as they're concerned, money is some kind of security. Wouldn't you agree to that yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, so what happened is, they said, well, great, they just put their hand over it, no sweat, but you've got to be a registered principal in the security. You have to get a securities license, and what you're doing, you have to be a financial principal. And I said, hey, I love it, bring it on. So anyway, they gave me all the documents for that, and I ended up taking all the exams that they had, and frankly, it was pretty hard. It was an all-day exam. Half of it was written, and had to do all the calculations myself. The other ones were like multiple guess, you know how that is. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I became a registered financial principal and a broker-dealer and a securities underwriter of everything. By reading all the documents, I said, oh, my God, this is another license to steal. Because I started looking at this. My friends out here were out here always trying to get money. You probably know the same, everybody. So what they do is they come to me and they says, George, well, how can you help me? I said, well, I can make a public offering, and we'll sit down and we'll issue stock. Everybody is buying stocks on new companies. They call them IPOs, initial public offerings. So anyway, what happened is I did this. Now, in order for the stocks to be moving or traded, I have to either find somebody else that's willing to invest in a piece of paper, the stock, or get my other brokers to handle it. Well, all the other brokers are doing it because the initial public offerings are all for these greedy people out here that want to buy something for 10 cents and sell it for $1 next week. You know how that is.
Yes.
Well, whatever happened is, all of a sudden, I'm doing this for a few months. I've still got money coming in from all different things, and I was still allowed to control the banks. Well, the next thing that happened to me is the Federal Reserve went to every bank that I was doing business with and said they weren't going to do business with me anymore. So what happened is, at that point, I'm bringing the attention to myself to a lot of real heavy hitters. And the next thing that happened is the banks then, if they weren't going to pay me again, so I paid you, I had to find a place to put your money because everybody believed in what I had to say. Well, at that time we had the savings and loans. You remember the savings loan industry? That's where the savings and loan were loaning money primarily on houses. In other words, they would put out the mortgage on it. Let's just illustrate, say simply, a 20-year mortgage. Well, these 20-year mortgages, then they had to have the money, but remember, I'm only putting the money in there for 1 year. Well, they were all, again, the same thing with the Federal Reserve, but I set it up to the savings and loans. Well, all of a sudden, I'm sitting down here with millions of dollars in the savings and loans, and an interesting thing happened. One of them says, how can we get more money? Because they had loaned out $100 million. And I said, I think I have a solution for this. I said, since I'm involved in the securities business, what we have to do is bundle the receivables. Aren't these mortgages are all accounts receivables, aren't they? In other words, if you signed a mortgage on your house or your property, that mortgage is worth something. The problem that I had with that, in calculating all that, is how do you determine the value of that mortgage? Because if I pooled together 100 of these together, they all have different maturity dates, they all may be at different interest rates, and they all may have a different, loan-to-value ratio based on the houses. You can understand the problem. So anyway, when I found, at this time I'm playing around with the guys in New York City, and I'm sitting here with them, and I said, what we can do is pull these together. And I said, we'll just make a new instrument, and they called them derivatives. You heard of the derivatives, means derived off of. So what I do is pool 1,000 of those in order to get a value on them, because I sat down with papers trying to figure out how to make a value on it so I could sell somebody. We got the guys together with AIG, the insurance company. They insured them.
Ah.
Now, now you can understand. Now, since they insured them, then we have a new product. In other words, a derivative. It had nothing to do with it. It was just a pooled amount of supposedly assignment of the mortgages and the notes. Now, what happened is this went all of a sudden like wildfire because AIG insured them, and all of them were selling them up and down the street, and all the S&Ls went into it. And so what happened is they bankrupted all the savings and loans. And then, seriously, and I was with the guys, we were discussing what to do with the assets. Remember all these mortgages? They all pulled them together, and we bought them for 30 cents on the dollar. And the government come in and bailed them all out. So the investors, the private investors bought it for 30 cents. The American taxpayer picked up the difference. So that was the end of the savings and loan world. Meanwhile, the derivatives became so hot, the brokers had these things. They started selling these packages of receivables to foreign governments. Now, that turned into another can of worms, because at this point, we have so many trillions of dollars outside they don't tell you about that are covered under derivatives, they can't even keep track of those, because what they've been doing is pooling the derivatives. If I take 5 or 6 of the derivative packages of these loans, or however we want to work, and we make another derivative of those. In other words, derived off of, again, 10 sections of all of that, and those have been sold around to the world. So we're over $100 trillion in debt right now.
It's all your fault, George.
so
I know it. Well, it is. It is in a way, because I'm really good at playing with the game on it. Well, meanwhile, course, I was asked, if people go to the internet and pull my name up, you can see some of my interviews. Anyway, I was attending a meeting in Aspen, Colorado, and when I walked in the room, they asked me to be the finance chairman for the next president. And I said, president of what? And they said, well, president of the United States. And I said, but I just started this $100 million project. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll put it on ice. I asked them who with, and yeah, they said they could do that. Well, during that whole, that day that I had, actually for the weekend, we discussed, who the next president was going to be and what he had to do, and, in order to get his job and all this other stuff. And then, my biggest problem I had was I asked him, I said, what does a finance chairman do? Because I've never done it before. I don't know anybody else that's a finance chairman. Anyway, they told me to sit down with Ted, and Ted would tell me all this. I think that was Ted Kennedy. And Ted was there, and I won't go to that whole story. That's on the internet. But this basically brought me into the attention of the big wheels. I started learning, because of all this stuff, I started my own bank outside the Federal Reserve. Most banks that you have in the United States are run by the Federal Reserve. As you know, there's no federal and there's no reserve. It's just a private corporation that's controlling all this mess that we're playing with. Well, meanwhile, our government, and its level thing, has to keep running. So they set up these different methods of collecting money. As you know, the Federal Reserve started about 100 years ago. A bunch of people got that together, and we got information on that. And you've probably said that in your program. But today, most people haven't got a clue. It's just unbelievable because our programming is set up. Now, I sat in on the meetings where they had set up what they call the Plan 2000, and that's put everybody on a debit card. If you get laid off today, you get a debit card. If you're on Social Security, they give you a debit card. It's one of these things so everybody going to be on a digit. Now, I had some friends in the 3-letter agencies, just to give you an idea, and then we had some big discussions. I went into this meeting, there's about 20 of us, and we were discussing on how to take care of the coming problem that they're creating. In other words, what do we do with all this, and how do we keep track of everybody? Well, at that time, there's a lot of ways to avoid or get out of the system if you wanted to. Well, now, what they have set up in this motion, and this is under the FEMA rules. You heard of the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency? In case of a national emergency, it's already law, you are going to have to go to the post office, and they're going to give you a new photo ID. And that new photo ID will have all the digits they need, and that'll be your, quote, your digit card. So they're going to have digits instead of money. And that's what they're planning right now. So I keep watching everything. Now, part of the game was to get World War III started, and that's in the Middle East. And this game that they started, and again, I said on the meeting, was to get this thing going in the year 2000. And, of course, that's the Iraq War and all that other stuff they give you. The same thing is going on over in the Middle East right now. They have to do...
Let me ask you a quick question. I know Sasha had one. So you said that part of the plan is to get World War III started. And I just got a YouTube today, and it said that prices of oil are dropping because the United States spent the last few years raising production. They've raised it 50%. They're able to lower it down under $100. It's settled around $60 a barrel. And that new level is going to adversely affect Russia. And they think that that's a strategy to push Russia into World War III. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Russia, some unique things that people don't realize. Behind the scenes, Iran has all kinds of nuclear reactors, and the nuclear reactors there produce electricity, which is sold to Europe. Meanwhile, Russia's been providing all the natural gas to Europe. You understand? So it's an economic game that's going on. Right now, because of what's happening, because of fracking all over the world, and the fracking industry is getting more and more natural gas, which they in turn convert to the fuels. The problem is that people are not aware of. A lot of places are pushing. Like if you go to New Orleans right now, most of the trucks now are on natural gas. This is all occurring all around the planet, and what's going on is all the fracking and stuff was based on a certain dollar amount, and that's killing a lot of the fracking places also. It's not that we don't have plenty of fuel right now, but it's affecting all of the industry because you need energy. Now, the other energy, and it appears that oil is going to be less than $50 a barrel very shortly.
Right.
Now, because of this and the energy flow on it, and because people are not investing, and like the Christmas rush, you're going to see everybody's going to be complaining because it's not very good. This is, it's an economic game over Christmas. And then after the first year, you have all the white sales and all this stuff to liquidate. But a lot of stores are getting ready. They're going to close up because of all of the government restrictions and health requirements that are done under the Obamacare. Between that and what's going on, we're going to start having, you're talking about the rioting that's going on, i.e. for the police, but we're going to have the rioting in the streets because they won't have any money to play with, and they're going to have the debit card, but because of the cost of all the food, have you noticed what the price of food has gone up?
Oh, it's crazy.
Well, it's going to go up a lot higher. But what we're trying to do, and when I'm on the radio and everybody, is right now is a good time to start looking at all the stuff. In other words, get your own self taken care of. Get yourself so your food is stored up. And I'm saying you should have at least a month or 2 months around. Now, I mean longer if possible, but at least that. In case of the history of the thing, if we go have a national emergency and they start doing their things, we're going to have rioting and everything, and that'll probably go on for a month or two. But so you should get together with other people of like minds to support each other in the days ahead.
Was that the purpose of the teach camps? Is to round us all up and...
Well, the purpose of the number one, Henry Kissinger said it all. He said, look, the number one problem we have on the planet, and it really bothered me because I'm sitting in the meetings on this thing. I said, well, wait a minute. Now, I'm the old school. We're sitting out here. I'm providing meat for everybody around the country, and Safeway and all these, the major chains. Albertsons, they were all buying stuff from us. It wasn't a big problem with that. Here's the problem of it. Where our cattle business is going down, prices of cattle are going up. People are now learning about eating vegetables and stuff, and so they're going that way. There also the problem is that a lot of it's genetically modified. Now, they won't let you do that in Europe, and they won't let them do that over in China. Now, they've been trying to get that because it allows them to get a bigger crop, but it's killing people, and they don't know it. It's a way for them to make money while they're killing us off, frankly. Well, Kissinger said, we're increasing, and these are the figures that I got when I was in Washington. I went to the Population Institute, which is about five blocks north of the White House. You can pull it up on the internet. They call it the World Watch Association, and it's funded by all the major corporations. And what it does is keep track of all of the natural resources. In other words, all your minerals, your water, food production, and everything else, and feeds it into a massive computer so the big corporations can figure which way to go on making for the consumers out here. Now, the consumers to them, on the planetary basis, we are increasing by 250,000 a day of our deaths.
Yeah.
That's 2.5 million people every 10 days. Now figure it. I used to think that was a good deal because I got new houses I could build for them, or apartments. And, I build all this stuff. I built shopping centers, office building, apartments, and houses all over 22 states.
Right.
Anyway, when I started looking at all of the numbers down there, there's no way we can continue this. They'll have to find new ways to maintain all these other stuff. Well, if you look around, you don't see any big fish in the ocean anymore. Where are not that they're not out there, but they're counted by the dozen. There's like big whales, the little fish. Certain places are still mining the fish or bringing it out. That's going on, but I was just in the Caribbean. I didn't see any big fish, any sail, or anything else. This is for about 10 days I was running around out there. Nowhere. And I talked to my friend who owns a dive shop down in Royton in British Honduras when I was there, and the fish are gone in the coral reefs.
Wow.
Now that's scary. And then when I was in Panama, the ocean down there, the ocean temperature is up 4 degrees. Now that's affecting both ends of the planet. Now most people don't recognize or think about it. But air goes from the North Pole to the equator it's circulating. As you know, we all look to the west for the winds to come down. Sometimes it comes up from the south because of the currents. But at the equator, it's the reverse. In other words, the winds are going the other direction coming across. Well, what we're looking at now, the plan is, of course, to get the war started in the northern hemisphere. I'm sitting here discussing with the guys about that. They want to get a nuclear war going. The radiation will last 4 or 5 days. And when you just brought up something, the Soviets have 3 nuclear submarines on the west coast, 3 on the east coast, 2 in the Gulf of Mexico. I was in New Orleans a few months ago, and when I was down there, the fishermen, they were complaining to the newspapers because they went out and took pictures of these submarines. Now think about a submarine that's 2 football fields in length, 5 stories tall, that can go 80 miles an hour underneath the water, totally undetected by all of our detection equipment. Add that, and that's today, add that to just 2 weeks ago, I'm getting notification in Havana, Cuba. You know where Havana is. There's Soviet destroyers there today. So I'm looking at the verification of the submarines on the West Coast. I talked to a naval commander down in San Diego. You know where the Navy's at. Anyway, they sent out, they had to go out and do their thing, do their testing and running around the ocean. Anyway, after they get after the 12-mile limit, there's a Soviet submarine out there, and the Soviet Navy, the sailors out there were mooning our troops as we went out. Wow. Meanwhile, they're also cutting down all of these things. Now, the other problem that they ask, and I just got an email from a military officer who saw my videos in Europe, just came back and went to Vegas, and I was asked to build an enemy prisoner of war camp in downtown Las Vegas. I didn't build it, but I have a copy of the contract.
What year were you asked that, approximately? Do you remember?
I have to go look up. I put it in I actually put a copy of it in my book, one of the books I published. I'll forget the date, but that's about 15 years ago.
15 years ago, okay.
And, yeah, anyway, they came back. I got this just a couple hours ago. They just emailed and said they were down there checking, and sure enough, they built a new one. Well, I didn't build it. Somebody else did. But they're setting them up. They don't call them enemy prisoner war camps now. My former friend that was checking it all out for me, the former head of the FBI for Southern California, he came back and he says they're changing the name to FEMA camps. Now, you can pull up the FEMA camps on your internet, and you're probably aware there's over 1,100 of them in the United States right now.
What are they officially saying FEMA camps are for? Is a story that the government says?
Yeah, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and that's to house the people that are coming around. That's what their official name was. So the official thing is kind of like, the story of Hitler when he gets through. They set up the camps and they intern them. People don't realize when World War II ended, for instance, the Japanese were experimenting with biological weapons. They had a whole prisoner war camp over there. They were using all the chemicals on people, how quickly you can kill them off. That man was transferred after the World War II over here and became in charge of Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is the biological research center over here. Same thing with the Germans. The Germans came over and helped set up all these plants that we have all over. So right now you can't tell anything that's going on. You have such a public, scream that's going on from Washington. Everybody screaming about Obama and all with the congressmen. But most of the congressmen, I'll tell you how that worked because I ran around with them. Most of them are sitting down here looking for donations to come in so they can set up and so-called lead, run the country to set it in which they've been programmed for. I'll give you a crazy thing. When I was in Beverly Hills a few months ago, we're sitting there joking about it. When the Obamacare was signed on by the senator there in Los Angeles, they went on to it, and what he did, he put in a rider. If anybody makes a movie in Hollywood right now, because they're not making them, they give them 7 years of no taxes.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. And what does that have to do with Obamacare? Absolutely nothing, but that's one of the writers who were in that. Well, the Obamacare thing is so full of that kind of stuff, there's no way it can come out. And the health care is set up in the motion. Even the doctors are quitting the profession, as you probably know. Now, I'm talking about what we can do today, and I'm concerned about all this, because my background, being in economics, if you want to look at it, as a former banker. I was a director of another bank that was a member of FDIC, but I had my own outside of it until the state shut me down, because I couldn't. Frankly, I couldn't loan out 10 times my deposits, and I couldn't make it work, make any sense to run the thing, because it's a dollar and cents thing. It's like any business today. If you notice, all the major corporations are merging with other ones at this minute. So we're going to have one massive control, primarily controlled out of other countries right now, because we're heading for what? We got 300 million people. When I flew over to Beijing, I was a guest of the government. I went all over China, and frankly, you have no idea what 1,300,000,000 people are until you walk among them.
Wow.
And that's what we're sitting here with 350 million, and half of our people in the United States are basically not working right now. So that's one. I'm just giving you a rough idea. Now the next question is, in the accounting books that I have for the World Bank and everything else, there's only one thing that's considered money. The only thing they consider money as an object that you can trade. And it specifically says gold. So why is China and why are them collecting all the gold in India the same thing? China told me when I was there, they said it's 5,000 years, it's our turn to run the world.
So what did they mean by that? Because they're trying to say that the Bible's only, a couple 4,000 years, so that already is, what are they saying about that?
Well, they have the population. They just said that they want to be the ruler of the world. Well, technically they are right now. We owe them a couple $1 trillion, our government. They basically, they bought this, they're buying all the natural resources around the planet. They bought the largest copper mine down in Chile. They just contracted with Bechtel for a $2 billion project. I know that because my son's a senior engineer with Bechtel, and he's in charge of the project. So, I know what's happening there. They also bought the largest oil companies up in Canada. They're buying all the natural resources everywhere, and they're buying all of the major companies they can here in the United States that are worthwhile having. So the only thing that's left now is we get too many people that are not producing anything, so they got to get the thing going. In other words, they got to get World War III started. That's their original plan. And since I said it in all meetings, I'll just share this with your listeners. I'm questioning everything as I'm going because I was at that age, they could sit down and look at it. What they said is most people go to work when they're 18 or go into the military when they're 20, and they work for 20, go to retirement 20 or 25 years. Well, what age is that? 44. And that's their cutoff date. They said anybody over age 44 will be eliminated, quote, by all means necessary unless they have a talent that they can use. Their game is to reduce the population of the United States, again, by all means necessary, down to less than 20 million. Now, that's the basis of the Georgia Guidestones. Go look that up on the internet.
Georgia Guidestones, 500 million planet-wide?
500 million on the entire planet. We're, according to the ETs, and they're monitoring us big time, they say we're at about 8.3 billion people on the planet right now.
George, were you saying it's going to affect the northern hemisphere more than the southern? What was you starting to say, and then we got different?
Yeah, the southern hemisphere, because if you notice, most of the wars and more of the things are in the northern hemisphere. People forget, if you really look at, where the Canadian line is, the United States and Canada, most of Europe is above that latitude lines. Did you know that?
Yeah.
So meanwhile, if they have the war going up there and then China and Russia and all the rest of it, This is where all the winds and stuff are going to be circulating around to cause the most commotion on the northern hemisphere. So when one of the governors, I've sitting having lunch, actually I had a sandwich inside the governor's mansion, and we're sitting here talking about it, and he says, well, I'm finishing my tour. I got my ticket. And I said, ticket to what? He said, to the underground facilities in Australia. Have you ever heard of Pine Gap?
Right, yes. We've heard of Pine Gap.
Tell our listeners about
Tell
Pine
our listeners,
Gap.
yes.
Pine Gap was designed by the Rockefellers a long time ago. It's my big thing. It's a joke to me because it was done 30 years ago. It was designed for 35,000 of the so-called elite, and it's all underground down in Australia. Here's the problem, and I'm joking about it with my other engineer friends. If you build your car, we'll say you had your car. Let's say it's 20 years old, and you have a part that goes out. Where can you get it?
You have to machine manufacture it yourself.
Exactly. And the same thing with how about all the underground facilities to maintain a structure that big underground that's 35 years old? Where are the spare parts? So and I have a friend, that's all they do is make spare parts. I mean, they make spare parts for some of our battleships and that kind of thing are 20 and 25 years old right now.
Right, yeah.
So we have this whole game, and you say, well, where am I going to be and what am I going to do? And our problem is that our economic system is done by so much advertising to get you to buy goods and or doing things. So they're all controlled, and you do down the bottom line, you see how much is provided on the advertising, what they're going to give you, and then you start looking at all the other industries that are basically figuring out a way to make money, like the pharmaceutical industries. I mean, the billions of dollars they get in pharmaceutical products that really have very little use for what the mankind's all about.
Right, they just
they addict people
drugs.
to oxytocin.
Selling drugs.
Yeah.
They're all drug pushers. So what's the purpose of all this stuff? They just keep us. Are they getting real money?
Economic slavery.
Yeah, from creating this population that's growing. I mean, they could promote birth control, but they don't. They
well, do you subscribe? Yeah, well, when I was in China, of course, they had you could only have one child in China. Remember that?
Yes.
Well, they've reenacted it right now.
Good
That's
idea.
the latest. Well, they keep the population in control because they know what's happening, and yet they're producing all the food and stuff, but they don't have the controls that we have over here in the United States. You have to look at it. Yeah, in other words, the agriculture department to checking things. But even with the agriculture department, we had half a dozen inspectors looking every time we went through the cows. They check the cow when it's walking, when we process it, all the organs and anything else to see and look for disease. But you have to understand, we were killing one every 90 seconds. It would be processed. How do you examine everything in 90 seconds? And that's the same thing with loading up all the food and everything across the United States. Tons of potatoes, they have to check with everything. Meanwhile, we're running out of water. You have to understand, water used to come down from, on the western part of the United States to the Colorado River, to the Grand Canyon and stuff. Up until the last 2 months, none of it ever went to the ocean again.
Wow.
And what happened is it goes to all the cities, and the cities process it, and we put all the chemicals in it, so it keeps building on it. Everybody downline is in big trouble. Meanwhile, we've got all the southern states, as you know, from California to Arizona and Texas and New Mexico and all that, out of water.
Yes.
How do you have water for enough people like in Phoenix, which has 3 million people now?
And they keep building.
Vegas, they keep building, but they can't get what they're doing is stealing the water of the aquifers, so there's nothing down there at this point, and it's going to all come to a head, and we're at a period of time, this is our periodic time of the planet itself, that we're getting ready to hit what they call, in the next 13 years roughly, or 12 years, the 3 days of nil time and the possibility of the planet itself flipping on its axis. And this is all part of, as you know, Nibiru and these other things coming down. But so exciting times we're going to look at, right?
I was just going to ask you, what do you think is going to make the planet flip on its axis? And you said Nibiru. So
well, we're already moving. The North Pole is already about 18 degrees different than what it was. So in other words, get your compass out. You can see how it's switching. We're already making the moves already into what we're occurred because of our cycle. Most people don't recognize what's happening within the universe because you got troubles not taking care of what's going on in your own backyard. But if you start looking from wherever you are, look at the sky up in the western sky, about 20 degrees above it tonight, if you have a clear sky, and look at the star that appears to be strobing red, blue, and green. That's an alien craft. And these people the extraterrestrials are monitoring everything that's going on the planet right now. And hopefully we get enough information so we can get enough people prepared for what's coming down. Now, they're already giving me a lot of information. It's like, I'll ask you a question. You've heard of crop circles, haven't you?
Oh, yes. We've heard of crop circles.
So what's the purpose of the crop circle? Do you know?
To inform us about what's coming down.
No, the crop circles have a couple purposes. The first one is to make people ponder what they're going on. The real purpose of it is to help keep the planet stabilized so it doesn't flip prematurely. Now, these crop circles are all over. You know, they make movies on them and they show you all that stuff. But that's the real purpose, is to stabilize the planet. They can do that. I mean, I've got videos of them being made, and you probably have seen those too. But
how do they
stabilize?
Flipping the crop circles. How do they stabilize?
How does that work? Yeah,
how does that work?
Well, they have them. You can see them. That's what they are. A lot of designs. There was one of them southeast of Denver, out in Parker. I went out to it. I had the newspapers with me. And the farmer, when I went out there, I said, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. It's another group of VTs. They saw the craft land. That's all I knew was gone. But the craft caused all the soil to, heated it up like a blowtorch. You can do that with the wood. That's what they did to the soil. I have a sample of that at home right now. So anyway, it's slightly radioactive. I thought that was interesting too. Anyway, we look at that, but most of the crop circles are there. They're putting in these energy streams into the planet on certain planetary positions. Now, as you know, they're happening all over the world. I mean, they did a bunch in India. There was up in Canada. There's some Montana and in Minnesota. I've got, pictures from everywhere because people send me a lot of stuff.
There's all these different configurations, and they, people put interpretations into them, and they say, they're telling us about, Nibiru coming in, or, some kind of message. Is there a message in there as well for the purpose of stabilizing the planet?
That's the primary thing, is to stabilize the planet and make people ponder what they are. So it makes you start thinking that there's something else going on. It's like, I owned a couple of coffee farms in Costa Rica. And down in Costa Rica, there's huge marble or granite spheres, totally perfect round spheres. Now, these weigh tons. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and they just, they're collecting them now. They're the government itself, so they can make a park on them to show people these things. But they're all different sizes. Well, then you start going down to Peru, and there's a lot of stuff down there. The Nazca Plains and all that, and underground. I have friends in Cuenca, Ecuador, and the alien have a craft. They almost come in nightly, and the guys down there take pictures of them. I mean, they're 100 feet off of the place where they are. So we're being visited by extraterrestrials, but at the same time, we got a planet that's getting ready for major changes. And now, at this point, all I can do is say, hey, people, if they want to get prepared, I suggest they email me. They can just go to my website, nohoax.com, and I'll be glad to talk to them personally and tell them how they can be able to, if they got wealth of any kind, I'll tell them where to put it as far as I'm determined. My only problem is we don't have an end to this thing because China wants to have their currency, and that they're meeting this next week again, the world bankers are. Whether they're going to use that as the main currency because everybody's dumped on the dollar.
Right, so we're shifting our currency. The ETs are visiting.
Right,
Which Go ahead. You
But
ask
it's
the
also
question.
you're saying that the big boys that want to precipitate a war, but it sounds like what our fellow man doesn't do to us, nature is going to do it anyhow.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to have both ways. Exactly. The planet itself is going to go through some major. Well, I was warned some time ago, and they said get prepared for 300 to 400 mile an hour winds on the surface of the planet. Well, I'm a builder. I don't know how much I built that could withstand that. I did fly down to Italy, Texas, and talk to the South brothers and David South, and then started building what we call the monolithic dome concrete structures. These will withstand anything. And because of the insulation, the way they have them, all set up. It's interesting. Yesterday I was with an architect at this building. I looked at the plans for Putin. Putin's going to be building them all over Russia.
What's he building? The monolithic dome?
Monolithic domes. Pull it up on the internet. You'll find out about them. I built some.
Nothing resists the wind. Is that the idea? There's no.
Yeah, it's a dome. The wind will go up and over the top of it. It won't do anything, but you'll be protected from all that. I built 3 of them in Las Vegas. My wife built the first one in Montana. And the guys are building some down in Ecuador right now, but they're building them all over the country. I mean, all over the world right now.
I mean, what if it's underwater? What good's that going to do?
Underwater? Well, if we got the earth changes coming up. You got to take that into consideration. And when the extraterrestrials have given me some indication on that, that's the reason why I want to stay away from. Well, they say stay away from the West Coast because I saw pictures of San Francisco totally destroyed by an earthquake. So, I saw all the buildings and everything, and, all that, it was all in crumbles down there. So, obviously, I said, well, I'm going to stay away from that end of it. Well, at that time, I had, a lot of property in Southern California. I basically liquidated all that and got out of there.
Well, if they have these crop circles in place to try to stabilize the Earth, we have extraterrestrials that you would think they have the technology to move us out of harm's way or to, prevent
or evacuate
the earth changes or evacuate us. Have any indications on those type of things? Any information? You there, George? Did we lose you?
Oh my God.
Uh-oh.
So I don't know if you've lost us too.
Hi.
I lost you.
Oh, okay. I was just, it was like all of a sudden talking to our listeners. George, I was asking, we have these crop circles that are stabilizing the earth. And we have the Bureau coming in, but we have other reports saying that, like A.R. Borden said that they already moved the earth out of the way. We're getting photos every day, and you can see the wings of Nibiru.
And evacuation ships, too.
And we have stories of ships that are going to come evacuate. What's your thoughts on all this from your perspective? On what's
I brought that up with the ETs, and in fact, a lot of other people that were, directly involved with them. And the ET said that they weren't, this was our experiment around here, and we keep looking at and forget who and what we are. I think the second hour we'll discuss what we really are and how this works. But they're not, they said if we would take you, you would trash our planet in half the time. So they were...
Just a few of us.
Well, but, you understand the rules of the game and understand their ideas of what they're planning on doing. And I can understand that and say, well, great, just lift us off. It's like, great, we'll take you. It's like Billy Meyer, they've taken him to other places. And all kinds of things. Of course, I was with him and joking with them. And then when I was there with Billy, of course, he was visited by the people from UMO, their planet there. And then I flew over to Spain and talked to Antonio Rivera, who's he has a group. There was groups of Umos or Umites, if you want to call it, over in Spain, and they were all setting up little camps and stuff to try to help and circulate the information slowly. Well, the trouble is, again, on a planetary basis, you have not enough people that are understanding who and what we are, because we're all set up on the systems of how they control our mind, the way we think, the way we act, and what we're doing.
Well, we're going to have to explore some of these solutions in the second half of the show. We've got like 2 more minutes. But it just doesn't make sense to me on so many levels, if they stick everybody in FEMA camps and they kill us off, who's going to bury everybody? It's going to stink. It's going to ruin the whole thing. Well, and it doesn't. It's so illogical what's going on. It doesn't make any kind of sense.
Who said it's going to be logical? They're going to just, hey, what's illogical about all the people walking in Washington, D.C.? I mean, I was down in Washington when they had 100,000 people walking by the White House, and you know what they said, back in Congress? The guys inside went in there, they just said that just rabble in the streets. Don't worry about them.
Rattling in the streets. So they just see us as a bunch of sheep.
Every one of them, like you, has the potential of realizing their divine self as well, and that since they too are here, they must be of the light at some level that can perhaps be reached by a change in mass consciousness.
Right.
Well, we have
stuff on killing like hunters.
Well, you tried to get to. I was with a House of Representative member yesterday, and we were discussing that same thing. What's going on. He says it's just too late. He says all the bills and everything that I passed in the last 5 years. He says the new ones that have come in and will overturn what I did 5 years ago. And trying to help the planet, and he just says it's just too late to do anything, and he's asking me where to go right now. I thought that was interesting.
About that on the second half.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message. Oh, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, 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 Merry
Revolution Radio. Do you have a child, a grandchild, a cousin, neighbor child, friend's child? Well, be here Christmas Eve because it's going to be a blast. Santa has agreed to be here again with us this year, and he will be live with Revolution Radio Straights and Sleigh, making calls to his favorite little ones. So, man, let's make this a fun and positive holiday season and really kick off Christmas Eve. And all you have to do is send an email to Santa@freedomslips.com with a number that we should call, the name of the child that we are calling. And along with Santa will be Mrs. Claus and Santa's head elf, Sydney Bean. So don't miss out. It should be a lot of fun for everyone, and you all have a wonderful holiday season right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where love and light should shine all year round. Merry Christmas.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslip.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, and my co-host is my incredible husband, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And before we go back to this exciting show, I just want to remind everyone that Revolution Radio is listener-supported, and we do need your donations to continue to bring you programs like ours. So please go over to the donation button and donate what you can. Anything you can is greatly appreciated. $1, $5, $10, $50, $20, $100, whatever you can donate will help very much. And thank you, mahalo, for your donation. And we've been talking to GeorgeGreen and Sasha. Would you like to say something before we bring George back on?
Oh, yeah. So we've been talking about how, George, how you basically saw the Matrix for the disrespect for humanity that it contained. You saw the evil in it. That evil sort of gave you purpose and meaning in life. And I want to know how you went from the heart of darkness and evil to the kind of lightened path that you're on right now, which seems so loving and it gives us so much hope. How did you do it?
Right. And what happened with Congressman? That's where we're at the break. Actually,
the question is, what happened to my congressman? They didn't re-elect him.
Oh, they didn't re-elect him.
So if you want to know what happened, I really have to blame Billy Meyer for this, but I can't blame him for this. But it was just part of as the extraterrestrials have told me, my particular job at this point is to try to wake people up to who and what they are, and a solution for each individual. I'm not out to save the world, but only each individual has to be on a responsibility for what's going on. Well, I'll give you some background on how I switched sides if you look at it. It all came back, of course, you mentioned my experience at Edwards Air Force Base, stationed there. But I'm 10 feet away from an alien craft, so that made my reality base was different than most other people who see them in the skies. And you probably, there's a lot of sites on right now that show you, they're keeping track of all the UFOs that are being seen around the planet right now. There's sites that you can see them every day. I get emails from every place that's showing me pictures and stuff that they've taken or the cities or whatever. But anyway, what happened is when I, of course, got involved with the Billy Meyer material, I'm looking at that picture book, incredible color photographs, of exactly the same thing I saw at Edwards. So that woke me up to, hey, wait a minute. Something's going on with the ETs. I can actually find out about it, and how can I help them?
How did you get to, you didn't tell us what happened at Edwards. What happened at Edwards Base? What did you see there? How come you were looking at an AT craft?
When I was in the Air Force, and my first assignment, I went to they put me in airborne communications, so I worked on all the aircraft, all the communications gear at that time. Anyway, my first assignment was Edwards Air Force Base, which is the Air Force Research and Development Center. That's where all the super secret planes are. Anyway, one morning I was assigned to do the post-flight inspection of the X-15. That's the forerunner of the space shuttle. And it's nothing more than just a rocket on skids. Edwards has the longest runway in the world. It's like 20-some miles long. So, you know, any of these craft that they have, they need a lot of it. Well, the X-15 is nothing more than a rocket on skids, frankly. It has, you know, some wheels up in front. Well, I finished doing the inspection. It was about 5 miles north of the main base. And I'm sitting with my Jeep, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was about 100 degrees, and they won't let you work out there when it's 100 degrees. So last week in August, just to give you an idea, out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, right? Anyway, I was around. I said, I got my Jeep. I want to keep my Jeep, and I had to put 25 miles a day on the Jeep. And so there was 2 hangars that were out there close to where the X-15 landed. And I decided to take the Jeep and go out and see what was in them. I was cleared for top secret, so I figured, you know, I could do anything. Anyway, I goes into this hangar, and there's this round disc, you know, about 20 feet across. I'm looking at it. I said, this is a neat-looking craft. It was round. So, you know, I'm 10 feet away from the thing. So when I went back in and checked with my commander, I asked him, I said, when can I work on the round craft? And he says, you saw that? And I says, yeah. He said, well, it's an ion-powered craft designed by Sikorsky for use in outer space. Now think about those terms. This is 1958. An ion-powered craft for use in outer space. Well, were you thinking about that stuff at that time? I mean, we had the X-15 and all the rest of the stuff and some of the, you know, missiles that were trying to go out. But here I am, I'm supposed to be looking at something that's really advanced. Anyway, I asked my commander again if I could work on it. He says, no, it's still a civilian project. There were, at that time, Edwards had about 25,000 civilians that worked on the base, and there was only 800 airmen. I was one of them. Anyway, what happened is I went back to my room. I checked in, but it was, you know, again, hot. And I figured, well, I'm going to go run around. My buddy happened to be the base photographer who happened to be slipping me pictures of all the other top secret things. And I said, get me some pictures of that round craft. And he said, what'd they tell you? And I gave him the story, and he says, come on with me. So I went over to the photo lab, and I'm looking at, you know, he had taken a lot of pictures of it. But he also took pictures of 2 dead aliens. Now, that got my attention. You know, I didn't see the aliens, I just saw the pictures. Now, I saw, you know, physically saw the craft out there, so this is giving you the timeline of how this all occurred.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm mad. I mean, if I'm carrying all these stupid badges around and I'm top secret clearance, why did my commander lie to me? So I went and confronted him with it. And of course, the first hour he gave me the debriefing on the top secret clearance, and that was the fine and the jail time if I had to say anything. And then at the last 10 minutes we discussed, he said, look, when the government's ready to tell the truth about UFOs and ETs, they will. Until then, you stick to the story about the ion-powered craft. I got you, in case some civilians would happen to see it somehow. Anyway, I was transferred off the base. About 30 days later, I ended up at that time, I ended up in Japan. But, you know, I won't go into my military. I ended up they cross-trained me into the Hound Dog nuclear missile, which is dropped in the B-52s. So I'll give you an idea. I had 2 years of the nuclear missiles, and I handle all the guidance and the controls on these missiles. Once they launched, basically they were all controlled, you know, electronically. Anyway, I got out of the service. I went to Colorado School of Mines. Anyway, I got involved, of course, in my dad's business, with the meat business, and that's where I got involved with banking and all the rest of it. But in 1984, I built a house in Aspen, and my housekeeper had a book called UFO Contact from the Pleiades. Incredible color photographs of exactly the same thing I saw at Edwards. That got my attention up.
Wow.
So what happened is, I was building down at that time. I was playing Monopoly, you know, building all over. I was building down at Phoenix, and this couple down at Phoenix had been the publishers of this book, and I flew down and talked to them. I said, how come this book's out here, and, you know, give me some more information about it. And they shared with me, and they said they wanted to publish another edition. And I said, well, why don't you? And they said they didn't have the money. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll loan you the money for publishing the next one. So make it a loan. You go ahead and publish the books, get them out there. I don't have anything to do with them. But when you get to selling enough to give me my money back, do that. We'll call it even. I didn't charge them interest or anything else. Just let them have it. Anyway, 90 days later, roughly, they sent me the accounting, and they'd received 3 times the amount of money I gave them. But there was no check. So I was a little mad about that. So I called them on the phone. I said, where's my money? And they said, well, we found out who you are. You don't need it. And I said, that has no bearing on whether I have money or not. You know, it's a question of what our agreement was. Anyway, I flew down and filed suit against them, and the same day, grabbed the next plane and flew off to Zurich, Switzerland. You know, without any announcement, nothing else. We headed off to Switzerland and went to Zurich and rented a car, and then took the 45-minute drive roughly outside of Zurich is Smearudy, where Billy Meyer lives. Anyway, when I knocked on the door, I'll share you the story. I knocked on the door, and the young lady answered. Her name was Bruni. And I said, I'm George Green. I put the money up for a movie that was being made, and also the money that's putting on publishing your material. And they said they never heard of me. And I said, well, I can understand that. And I says, well, you go back and tell Billy, I got some questions I want to ask him, because I think his information should be told to the world. And she says, I don't think it's going to work very well. I said, well, you just go tell him the buck stops here. So she came back about 10 minutes later, and she says, Mr. Green, Shirley MacLaine was here 2 months ago, and she promised to help, and nothing has happened. By the way, Shirley not only investigated that, but went around the world on the Palladian stuff. She was really into that. So she's really an expert on the Palladian connection. At any rate, what happened is at that point, I says, well, if I can't see Billy, and she said, you know, all Americans are crooks. They come over here and take our pictures and take our material, and they don't share anything with us. We're not going to see you. And I said, hey, I'm sorry. Anyway, my wife and I went on over to a hotel that was close in Wyla. We were probably, 30 minutes away. Anyway, we parked there. We told her that's where we were going. And then we were going to head off to Austria, just, make a vacation out of it. At any rate, next morning, knocking on the door was Bruni, handing me a 2-page message from Quetzal, who happened to be the Palladian commander. Now, it says my name in it and everything else, inviting us back over to the compound with Billy. And so that we spent the next week getting my mind blown. I mean, everything I thought I knew is based on a lie, or there may be partial truths in it, or, it's like everything else that I've learned. Everything is different. Anyway, by going over the material and everything, I made a deal with Billy, just so you know, that I would go ahead and assist him in getting the word out, but I had a problem. Because I said, I have attorneys out here to keep me out of trouble, because as a real estate developer, you're always being sued by somebody. I mean, just for no reason. They just think that's a good game. Anyway, I said, my problem is that the guys down in Arizona claim to have the worldwide rights to your story. And he said, yeah, you signed it, they put up the money for doing all that. And I said, my problem is that I'm suing them. And before I can go ahead, and I made a deal with him and the ETs both. I said, I'll get this thing squared away, because my attorneys in Beverly Hills were the attorneys for the Screen Actors Guild. I figured if anybody can break a contract, they could. Anyway, I said, I'll contact them, have it set up into motion, and once I get this all cleared, then I'll go ahead and then I'll provide the funding, and we'll get these books published and information and get your story to the world. Anyway, about, I guess it was a month later, Dern called me. Dern Mason and Klein is the legal office out there. He says, we got it all set up, and he said, come on over to my office. So I went over to his office, and I'm sitting in his office, and he said, we got it arranged. If you have Billy come over here to appear in the court, we'll have this thing all set up. We'll have a hearing, and then you can go ahead with your agreement with Billy. And he didn't really believe about the ET's things, but I showed him the pictures too, but he's got it set up. At any rate, what happened at that point, I says, I have to have Billy over here. I said, we'll call Billy from his office, which we did. And I talked to Billy. I said, Billy, I have to send you a ticket to come over here to appear in the courts so you can front of the judge, a typical legal thing on it. And Billy reminded me of the pictures he showed me of San Francisco, the whole West Coast going under an earthquake, which is upcoming. He was taken forward in time and saw that. And I said, yeah. And he says, I'm not leaving. I have 3 children, which he did. And he says, I'm safe here. You're going to have to find another way. And then the next thing happened after that. I said, okay. I said, I'm joking. I said, we'll have to let the ETs figure this one out. Anyway, the next thing I did, we were out on my wife and I got my car. I had a little 450 SL Mercedes, convertible. And we're going down 101 on the highway. And they had one of their beam shifts following me in broad daylight, just to remind me what was happening was real. So anyway, that's basically some of the story. And then, when I was over there, he had a bunch of documents that were not covered by their agreement, and Billy was taken along with a Greek priest to a tomb, which were wrapped in resin, was the original writings of Judas Iscariot described to Christ. In those documents, I'm reading those, and I said, my gosh, this information has to go out, because it was identical information or similar to the information that was given when I was a kid. When I was 14, Dr. Walter Moyer, who was one of the doctors that dug up the Dead Sea Scrolls, came back and gave me basically the same information that was in the Talmud of Emmanuel, or the Talmud Needs story or book of, and then Manuel, which is his real name. Anyway, reading all the documents, it gives us the spiritual teachings of how and what we're supposed to be living on this planet and the universe, which is really incredible.
What's it say?
Well, I'll give you some of the illustrations. Well, I'll give you one way. This is Christmas time, right? Go to my website, nohoax.com, and read up Satan Claus. They wrote it. Just read the whole thing, Satan Claus. It will give you the information. The whole book, first part of it goes into the so-called commandments, and the second part goes into all the other things. So we'll be able to live in what we call balance within the universe. So in that, I'll give you one of them. For instance, the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." Remember that?
Uh-huh. Yeah, we heard that.
You know what the real commandment is?
What?
"Thou shalt not murder thy fellow man in thought or deed." Oh. Because in John 1 in the Bible, it says, "In the beginning there was the Word." Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That wasn't correct. In the beginning, it was thought. Because when you pray, aren't you putting out thought? And when you meditate, aren't you hoping to receive thought? In other words, communication. Am I right?
Wow.
So, okay, now I'm just giving you something. This is all spelled out in here. Now, the next thing it went into, it discussed what and who and what we really are. One of that, in a way, "Thou shalt not murder" is just one of them. My pet peeve, however, another one is, "Thou shalt keep the Sabbath day holy." What day is that?
What day is it according to your perspective?
Every day.
Saturday?
Every day. Every day. You give thanks to the creation for allowing you, every day. You don't have to go to a church to do it. It's there. And there is, every day is what you're here for. In other words, there's a little prayer they give us. "I am a human becoming, help me become." Well, in the same game land, I'm going through all of the so-called commandments and stuff, and I'm asking the ETs, and of course I'm seeing what's happening. If you have a lot of pictures, you see them. You see the craft all of a sudden being condensed. It's basically light. Well, I got involved with the University of Science on there, and the University of Science has a book, Secrets of Light. You and I are nothing more than a product of the creation itself, and its thinking. Condensed thought is light. When they say it's, make light of the matter, everything is light vibrating at a certain frequency. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, if you take the periodic table of elements, it is different bases of light condensed. So the periodic table is nothing more than that. When you leave this veil of forgetfulness, you go back through light, back to to thought itself. And thought is the key. Now, when you start opening this up into the Pandora's box of stuff, then you understand how the masters, in other words, how did Christ create 1,000 loaves of bread out of one, right?
Right.
You know how it was done?
He thought it.
He created out of thought and a condensed thought, which we are. But he learned how to do that. That was some of the teachings that he got when he was over in India. Anyway, a lot of these documents and stuff are happening. Well, have you been down to Florida, down south of Miami, to the Coral Castle?
I haven't been there, but I heard about it.
Well, there's a guy there that had no schooling whatsoever, and he's moving tons of bricks and all the way around. Now, how did he do it without any equipment, anything else?
Right.
Anyway, the process is understanding how we, taking thought, produce things. Now, I happened to was running around when I was doing all this research. I was going heavy because I still had friends in the so-called agencies. And one of them was out teaching people how to transmit thought. And we transmit thought or meditation or however you want to in many dimensions. And our government's actually teaching people how to read other people's minds or transmit thought. And they're learning how to make condensed thought into things. And we're doing the same thing now. In other words, how did it materialize? It's kind of like this planet is in kind of if you want to know, it's condensed, but we have certain energy places. You know, the Devil's Triangle, whatever happened to the airplane, right? Or the same thing that just happened over, over off of China where the plane disappeared, right? They just moved into other dimensions. Now, all this stuff is all explained in the books and the material we have, but you have to take it one step at a time.
So how does this apply to what's going on with the dark side that we talked about in the first half of the show?
Well, let's do it. Once you wake up to how much power you really have and understanding that you are, basically you're nothing more inside this rent-a-wreck other than a spirit having a physical experience. At a soul level, it has actual weight. It weighs 22 grams connected to your heart. These are all the things. Now, the dark guys know about this thing, so they try to manipulate a lot of this thing, and they have been successful in creating artificial beings, artificial animals. These are soulless beings. Clones.
I've met some of those, yes.
Well, this is happening right now in front of us. So we're part of a master game going on a bunch of, if you call it the dark guys, and the dark guys think that most of the people are too stupid to understand what's going on, and they just want to control them, and their ego is, I can sit back and take care of my family, let everybody out here work for me, and I don't have to, that's what happened on the entire planet. The only trouble is, the planet itself is starting to make some major changes, and that's where you're having the winds, the oceans, and everything else. The planet itself is getting ready to do a big cleansing.
Do you think the planet is alive? Is it conscious?
Yes. Well, it was. You have to understand, this planet was really inhabited originally, as you probably know, the Anunnaki, but also Mars was an inhabited planet, and a lot of people from Mars came to this planet. So we have a lot of generation changes that are happening all over the place, in not only here, but other universes. I know I was concerned about that. In fact, I was asking Billy, he was taken to the end of this universe. There is an end. And he said that the craft then slowed down and bent and went into another one. So I look at it from we're a series of cells. Your body's a series of all kinds of cells. Well, there's vast universes and vast cells throughout everywhere, and we're on an incredible journey from the creation itself. As they said, above all things is the creation. And I'm joking. I said, what's above the creation? This is when I'm talking to the ETs. And they said, well, there's still mysteries for them. So that's all I can.
They counter the universe is finite, and I think I've heard that from other people like George Casavillas. He's a contact, the experiencer, and so they're saying that they see another universe. So you're saying that the ETs that you talked to were actually able to go into the next universe?
Yes, many.
Okay.
They actually took Billy to another universe so he could experience the thing on it. So they're experimenting, but they also take him into many dimensions. The ETs are telling me that we have many dimensions. Some of them that are similar to us. We're just a vibration away. Well, if you take a look at light from itself, you've taken the information The University of Science has the book Secret of Light. Well, you can go to my website and order it and read it. But it goes into the details, and I have many documents on that, on how you can take your mind to create physical matter with thought.
So you have, George, you have 3 books that you've written. Handbook, New Paradigm, Becoming and Embracing the Rainbow. Can you tell us a little bit about your books?
I didn't write those. I'm joking with the ETs. I said, I'll be your publisher. You guys, we sit down there discussing it. And I said, well, the history of the planet, and when we have something of the author of the stuff, is we either deify or crucify the messenger. And I said, well, it's true. And I said, the only thing I'm going to do, I agree to be the publisher. I'm joking with him. I said, let's do this. And I said, I'll tell you what it has to be. The book can't be, I gave them all the instructions. It has to be less than 200 pages. That's what the books are. They should be pocket size, so you can put them in your pocket or your purse or whatever and carry them around. Because a lot of them information in those. I mean, of course, you download them off the net, you'll get a bigger book. We have them available. But anyway, they gave them all to us. And jokingly, when we were done, then I says, in order to get the book going, I'm discussing the titles, and they gave me all the titles, and they also did the write-up on the back pages. I didn't have to do anything. I'm sitting there watching the computer, just clinking it out. It's interesting. And then I said, and I'm reading it, and I'm looking at some of the things, and I said, that should be in italics. And I don't know how they did this, but they would change the verbiage into italics.
Wow.
Without,
so you're doing this. I was going to ask you, did you have to edit it, and was it in English?
Oh, I got it. Sure, it was it's computer. It was computer driven on the thing. Yeah, I got to edit it, because when you're doing the translation, certain words, it's like when I was I went to Stoshibashi University in Japan, and we joke about some of this stuff. Like they don't have a word for lightning. It's called Eiki Reiki, or a bolt from the blue. And then you start looking at other languages. We have one word in the United States that has 18 different meanings, and it's only 2 letters.
What's that?
Well, think about that. I'm giving you a question, your listeners. Tell me about it. I'll give you the answer in a second or two, but it's basically there's a word that has 18 different meanings, and it only has 2 letters, and we use every day. Strange, huh?
Yeah, it's drawing a blank.
Okay, I'll give you the answer. Up. UP.
Oh, up.
Yeah, see, how many times can you think about it? Put it into sentences. If it's up to me, I'll climb up the ladder. I'll do, it's all the different meanings that you understand?
Yes, I understand.
So look, it's the same.
So you didn't have to touch the keyboard.
I don't have to do anything.
And wow, I'd love to see that.
That's like with Moses getting the stuff.
But see here, when you start looking at, you can do that by using some of the techniques they have as thought made manifest. Well, thought made manifest, that's what mankind is.
So what was going on in your day? Were you just sitting at your computer and all of a sudden it starts typing, or did you ask them?
They communicated with me, orally, basically. I didn't see them. I just heard. They'd have to woke me up, say, hey, wait a minute. But then I got it, like I say, during this concept of all this stuff. When I was, for instance, when I came back on the thing, first thing from Billy's place, first thing we did, we became in contact. Because when we published, see what I did was agree to publish the Talmud of Emmanuel. And Billy got mad at me because I wouldn't print the German edition. In other words, his Greek priest, well, I'll give you the problem. The Greek priest could read Aramaic. The Greek priest thinks a certain way. He's different than, say, a Catholic or a Buddhist or whatever during the translation. So he translated it into Schweizerdeutsch or High German. It's different than normal German. We got a college kid to translate it into English. And by reading that English, there's a lot of errors in there. But, it's a people's concept of using the word. And when I looked at it, I said, no, I'll do some editing myself, because I'm looking at it. I'll give you, for instance, one of them is another one of my deals. On the translation, they use the word Jew, Jew. But how could they do that? 2,000 years ago, the word Jew did not even occur in the English language until the 18th century. Did you know that?
Did not know that.
It first appeared in an English play by Sheridan called The Rivals in the year 1775. Of course you knew that. You're just joking. So anyway, that opens up the Pandora's box. If that first occurred, what did that really go? Well, you can go into the way they spelled it, E-I-E-W-E, or other things like that, but then you find out who their background is, and it all comes back to the Khazars, and you find out that this Mongolian Nordic tribe merged itself with the Judeans, and, you go through the whole system, but that's the first rule in the universe, is what? Gain all knowledge so you can wisely follow the laws of creation. Wow. You're going to have to learn how they apply, just like you asked me. What day is the Sabbath? Every day.
Right.
Now you're going to start living, understanding that it's a blessing for you to experience at this level. Now, all of the details, not only did they give you a breakdown on it, they wrote 2 or 3 pages of information so there will be no mistakes. In other words, we've got all these things. I'll give you an illustration how to confuse people. Exodus. The book of Exodus, they're making a movie of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you go to Exodus 20, that's the so-called 10 Commandments, right?
Right.
But if you read Exodus 21 and 22, it takes them all away. In other words, Exodus 20 says, thou shalt not kill. Exodus 21 says it's okay to kill your dad if he strikes it. It doesn't make sense. There's too many contradictions on it. Well, I ended up publishing the book, The Spiritual Laws and Lessons of the Universe, which makes it so there will be there won't be any confusion. And so that book's going out. In fact, I lectured in Salt Lake City, and a lot of the bishops are using that for their Sunday lessons.
Wow. So this is awesome. So we're still back to the quandary. We've got this whole oligarchy, the power elite, the Illuminati that want to wipe us out. It is like Monopoly. It's like a chess game. And we've got the extraterrestrial delivering us these books and information. And we have all these contactees like Billy Meyer, and I'm a contactee, and there's over 1 million contactees now. So we have some kind of intervention coming down. So how do you see this playing out? I just don't get that that this Georgia Guidestone's depopulation agenda bomb is going to actually play out. But that's what I get from my guides or my ET contacts. But we've got like about 30 minutes, and there were a couple questions that the audience wanted to ask, but how do you see this playing out? Because I mean, look, I'm the same as you. I said, no, this can't be. But when I go down and I spent time at the World Watch Association and going over all the documents, I want to see for myself where they got these details, and they're absolutely right. We're destroying the planet. Well, how are you going to reduce the population? And remember, their plan was a long time ago. The Plan 2000 was, Jimmy Carter's the one that put it in writing and gave it to everybody, and that was given to him to put out. I mean, he's responsible for putting it out, and why the Georgia Guidestones are in Georgia, all that stuff. It's not a problem. He was told what to do. In fact, I'm sitting in the meetings when they told, when they asked me to be his finance chairman, what he was to give away the Panama Canal, which he did. In other words, it used to be our property, is now controlled by, others. The China really runs it right now. But, you have to look at all these things. And the other things that he has to do is instigate and get World War III started. And that was, of course, starting over in the Middle East. So, all these things play out doesn't mean they actually go out, because when you make and manifest them, there has to be some kind of balance. The problem with everything, the thought of everybody, it's all going out. When you think, you're putting something out, or when you pray, you're putting out a thought. Where's it going? It's being such a mess around the whole planet, it's all in chaos. It's going into the morphogenic field, and it feeds back to each individual. So our thoughts, our deeds, and create reality, but we continually
Right, but you got to remember that in the little handbook, if you read the handbook, the 4 basic laws, the first one is the law of attraction, or which is whatever you put out, you're going to get back, or as Christ said, what you sow, you shall reap. In other words, there's got to be something going on. Well, on the game, what's the second law? The law of intent, because as your thought, you have to. What was your intent for putting out that thought? The next thing you have to do is allow. This is a time sequence of our physical body. Allow that thought to be made manifest. The 4th law, it's got to be in balance. Well, we're all out of balance. Everything's out of balance right now.
You take it back. Does that count? Take it back. I'm going to replace it with another one. I mean, that's what
most of it
kind of says, is that continually putting thoughts into the continuum at the speed of light, and then it's coming back to us, and so we're creating reality, but it's creating us, and then we're creating reality, and back and forth. So my thought is that we can shift our reality, start with each individual, like you were talking about, changing one person at a time. There is a critical mass number, and where we will achieve balance. So I'm just hurrying up, doing all these shows and talking to everybody, and there is something happening. It's taking off. I'm telling you, it is. So
well, that's a whole lot. Why do you think I run around the world lecturing? I've been going everywhere around the world, and I lecture every place. I mean, I was in Russia before they took down the Berlin Wall. I mean, it's a.
Because we had the Berlin Wall is the prime example. We had a reality at that time that seemed like the poor people behind the Berlin Wall were never going to get freedom. And then all of a sudden, we apparently reached some kind of critical mass, and the wall came down, in like 24 hours? It was like down. And it was a whole new world. When I was growing up, that was the main part of our reality. So we have this agenda by the Illuminati. It's out there all over the internet. People are going, yeah, look what they're trying to do to us. So it seems like it's like the Berlin Wall, that we're going to reach this critical mass and just, someday just stop participating, stop going to stores, stop buying gas, stop going to work, whatever, what it takes, and then, mass.
You're going to. I agree, except for you got to come back to, you have to, like they're telling me right now, there are too few of the people awakening up to get together with other people of like minds to support each other. In other words, what you're doing, you get with other people, and as you're doing this, you're supporting each other and building some kind of what we call a remnant on the planet. And we're not going to save everybody. Nobody's out that. You're going to save yourself. But if we can have a group of people, I have a lot of people that follow me down to Ecuador. I get all kinds of them down there because I, have a place down there. And Brian O'Leary, the Apollo astronaut buddy of mine, he went down to Vilcabamba, and we were, down there lecturing. In fact, some of these people, like Project Camelot, Bill came on down there, and we did a lecture down there. Bill stayed there. He's still there.
He's still there. Well, I could talk to you maybe off the show about some of my ideas of how to accelerate this process. I don't want to take up airtime here because that's not what this is about. Sasha, you haven't spoken for a while. Please interject something.
It's just really interesting if we look at what we are we manifesting a dystopia or a utopia? What it seems to me that we're really manifesting is our reflection, talking on radios and getting feedback from people and reflecting on the process of reflection itself, which ultimately lets us identify with source. And all these things that are going on in the world, I think, are probably going on inside of ourselves, including a part of ourselves that we might be calling soulless. But it too is of the light, because everything that is. And so I'd say look within. And I'd say that to everybody, including those you think soulless.
Well, I look at everything, since everything is condensed light, everything, regardless of what's made or what's not made or anything. It's a question of what it's need for and what it's doing. And if we try to do everything so it's in balance, that's a real hard one right at this minute, because we're so out of balance.
Yeah.
So what makes us out of balance? That's the question. And I look at the symbol of the yin-yang, which Nassim Haramein says is actually the quantum field. It's a a vortex, a singularity, and he animated it. I can't explain it, but he proved that was within. There's a torus, and this vortex is within each person, and so we're out of balance on this planet with our inner and outer masculine and feminine. And so look at our planet. We don't honor our women. We don't honor 51% of our society. And so if we start with our own personal relationships and start honoring the women, and here I am a woman speaking this, but I'm just speaking as a universal being, and start honoring that inner feminine, that is the first step to balancing all of creation, because creation was created with the masculine and feminine halves, and that's the continuum, the light and dark.
We're supposed to be equally divided sex pairs.
Yeah.
And in the Spiritual Laws book, it gives you all kinds of information on how to live and what to do and what your focus is. But all of the movies and everything else is all focusing to keep it out of that. The women are just to be playthings, and that's not right. And so what you do is the same.
Don't go to the movies. Shut off the TV. You can see it's all programming. They're trying to make us more and more violent. They have violence. They kill. How many people do they kill in each movie? How many people can you kill? I mean, it's ridiculous. Even going to the premiere, you're sitting waiting for a movie to start, and they have the commercials for the next one, and they're killing thousands of people in 10 minutes, and it's insane.
That's the programming to get people to think that killing is okay. But I remember I told you, thou shalt not murder thy fellow man in thought or deed. So when you start looking at it, how can they do that? They got to create, since the mind's easily adaptable. Dr. Beck and I talked about that because he worked for the government doing the mind controls games. And all you have to do is put thought into people and have them receive the thought without communicating as we did it, just mental communication. And it's like you receive thought, that's coming from someplace, and then we have games playing on other dimensions. We've got beings that are playing, claim to be, or they've been down here. It's like, Ramtha and all these other ones that we're doing things. We're not saying it didn't have a lot of truth in them, but you got to find out what the factor is that's making it change, and that's our lesson of discernment. We got to discern everything right now.
Right. So how do you do that? How do you discern and decide what is true, what is false, what is real, what is perfect?
That's when you get to reading the Spiritual Laws and Lessons and the 3 books. When you get to reading all of those, it will give you some knowledge in order to understand what's real and what's not.
What are some practical, is there anything you can kind of summarize? We've got another 15 minutes. I think I have 1 or 2 questions. What practical things can our listeners start doing besides reading the 3 books,
Well, the practical matter, because of what's going on, is understand that it's a big game that's being played against us, and we should understand why are they doing that. From a planetary standpoint, the guy said, well, I got to get rid, Kissinger said, we got to get rid of people who are going to keep the planet, otherwise they're going to destroy it, and we're destroying ourselves.
Right, so
and then we get,
and they've kind of programmed us to be consumers, and we're getting all this stuff way beyond what we need, and so that's accelerating the destruction of the planet in that process.
And also understand the weather, understand the light, understand everything. Like if the weather is going to be changing this way, which is exactly what they've been saying, it's just our sequence of events are not. In other words, somebody says we got to have it, done by Thursday. Well, which Thursday? The second Thursday of this week or whatever. That's the only thing that I notice on all the information. They don't have exact timing because we have a time that keeps changing. I mean, what do we just get through changing right now? Daylight savings, right? And I just talked to my son who just flew in this morning from Santiago, Chile, and because of daylight savings time, they're 3 hours difference. Because daylight savings down there, they're on it too because they're on the southern hemisphere. But normally, when we're not off of daylight savings, there only be 1 hour difference. So it's how do you keep track when you're in an airplane, you're finding someplace? How do you have stability? Because everything is changing, even dimensionally, when we move north and south.
Mm-hmm.
So when I looked at it, what is the most balanced place? Of course, around the equator. Then you look down and you say, how can I live down there? I picked Ecuador because you can pick a climate that you want. And there's only 13 million people in the whole country. And yet, like in Cuenca, day or night, the temperature is 70 degrees and no humidity, no bugs. And yet, 90% of the world's crops grow somewhere in Ecuador.
Oh, okay. So it seems like a logical place. But if we all ran to Ecuador, the planet would just tilt.
Well, you can't do it. When I went down there. Oh, don't you run like me? I went to New Zealand. I love New Zealand, and the people are all helping. But when I was down there was 90 million sheep and 3 million people in the whole country.
Right.
Now they got rid of all the sheep. Now they were, the wool and all that stuff. You have to look at everything. Where's the balance? When I was in China, that scared me because almost all their population is in the major cities. And they have, now they got the high skyscrapers. They got them everywhere. They got everything going on. They got 500 million people over there that are on, just playing with their computers.
Wow. So
I look at, and I say, hey, well, my books should go over there. And so I was trying to get them set up so they can convert them to Chinese and do other things, but they do speak English about everywhere. But I just got my comment back on this last week from my people I was working with. They won't take my books because they're too controversial.
Oh, yeah. So you're not able to reach them with that. So there's got to be other ways.
Yeah, you got to do something else. And then you have so many people where they come out with their Bible, and they're going to go out and try to convert people. Which Bible? There's 200 versions of the King James Bible. And most people don't even know who King James was.
Well, what most people are looking at is entertainment. And if you could create a movie that somehow get past Hollywood, which is controlled, but some kind of entertainment, because they don't really read books anymore. They've gone into the computers. I think your YouTubes are probably your most effective way of reaching people and you got to keep it short because they all have ADHD. But some kind of entertainment, something they can sit back and watch and they don't have to do much, might be the most effective mechanism.
Yeah, it's the new electronic gear that they have. You sit there and talk to it, and it automatically will text it for you, or you tell it you want to go someplace, and it tells you how to do it all. That's changing all of the mechanisms. I've been publishing for 25 years. I got 25 tons of books sitting in my warehouse. They're not going out the door.
Yeah, the people are buying
because the books they're closing down all over. 90% of all books are romance or mystery novels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then you go back to 5% of them are for schools. Most of the schools are quitting the books. They're going to what? Downloading down there. That's right. It's all digital. And if you're a scientist trying to get in, the distribution is the key. With 50,000 new books being made every year, well, there's more than that now. Even Amazon is allowing the private guy to make his book. They put it up there. They'll put it out, print it, and do everything else for you. That doesn't mean you're going to get it sold. It's the marketing on it, right? It's like being on your program. How many people are listening? How many of them will go to my website, nohoax.com, nohoax.com,
go to George
and go read, go find. Like I say, read the site. The books are free to download. I don't charge anything for them. Go read the section on Satan Claus, which really affects Christmas.
I will when I'm done with this thing.
I have a formula, George. It's 1/100th of the people that read the push-out ads that I do for this program. That's how many people will look at the site.
Right.
Well, that's good.
You're not going to get rich selling books anymore.
They'll look at the site for 1/100th.
But if you want to,
1/1000th will send for the books.
1/1000th. So.
Well, they don't have to send for it. They get it They get it downloaded for free. So we look at it. But I was getting 1 million hits a month to my website, and the actual users we're looking back now are maybe 35 or 40,000 that stay on longer than 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But it was a lot more, but yet the problem that we're having too is even the radio stations. I mean, you get a few quote tacos out here. It's like George Norrie show. When I was down there, we talked to George Norrie, as you know, just recently. That all these things are going on. It's a question on which audience and what are they listening to. And they have the same malarkey by every one of them talking their opinion on what they're told today, like, the marching that's going on, or the Chinese, or Ebola, or something else. So it's like, I just talked to my friend over here, about Ebola, and the doctor over here that discovered all the stuff about AIDS and how it was engineered by man to get rid of people, and yet they don't talk about it.
Yeah, this is biochemical warfare, so it's
it's tough. AIDS is transmitted by all bodily fluids, so it's kind of interesting. And you go to Haiti, most of them have AIDS. It's interesting how they keep them going.
Yeah, that'll eventually, those who survive and reproduce and have AIDS, eventually they will somehow evolve.
Well, it's selective reproduction, but then it's a requirement. It's kind of like what the China is, reprogramming people to understand when you bring in somebody. The trouble is, with 1,300,000,000 people, and there's only so much goods on the planet, and China, of course, they're making everything. There's hardly anything you can buy that's not made in China right now.
Let's say they do their agenda, and they're first, what are they going to do? They're going to bomb us? And you're saying
when our meeting was, they're going to get the nuclear war started. They say biologicals are much cheaper, so I expect a bunch of new biological things that they may release.
Great. Are they going to use the fear porn like they do, with Ebola? Or are they just going to... they could really start killing people off, and we don't connect the dots pretty rapidly. And that's the is because if you look at the lives around us, I have more and more people dying from cancer.
That's right.
That's cancer. So that might be part of the biochemical warfare that's already started. Let's start reducing the population with wiping out people.
Yeah, well, I have friends in Ecuador that they went in federal pen for curing cancer. You can go to Alpha Omega on the internet and go read all about cure for cancer. They got it right there. They still sell this stuff. So, how many people?
Do chemo and go the conventional way, and they're just going to lose the battle.
No, they can't. Chemo, radiation, that's not the way to go. There's other ways to do it, and we tried to find out what kind of cancer it is, and then how far is it metastasized and everything else. So we got a lot of games we're playing all the time, and that's only one of the destructive things that they have. The pharmaceutical companies get you mentally so you're down. We got kids taking diet sodas all over the place. 20% of all of the sodas sold are diet, and that's all poisons.
All poisons, yeah. So they're killing us off by these slow killers. And so if you're drinking all those like diet sodas and stuff, you're basically suicidal. They're consuming things that are slowly eating you from the inside out. And
that and even the water systems. What do they put in it to clean the water up? And that's the same thing. That's what you're asking. I don't know if you have any guests that have questions, but I'd be glad to.
Let me go back to that. There was a couple. Sash, do you have a question? He has a question.
I don't have a question. What I see is that you're saying that our becoming consciousness is what causes manifestation, and so what some of the people I've been studying are saying is how cooperating consciousness, meditating together in special places that have are in contact with the earth. May allow us to get that 1% of change, which is enough to cause the perturbations in the mass consciousness to help us transcend this materialist matrix and understand that we're spiritual beings too.
Well, I think if you put any kind of shield you want around you at this time, ask for that shield. I think you do anyway when you meditate. You ask for all dark energies leave your space. You actually demand that they leave your space, and they have to follow that.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Okay, I have a practical question from Jer Bear. He wants to know, where were the FEMA camps built in Las Vegas? Are they by the railroad yard down behind the Union Plaza Hotel? He asks.
I don't. The emails me. I can forward them the letter the email I got from somebody that was just down there and said, "Oh, actually, you can ask around there." I heard that they moved it outside of town a little bit, but it may be still downtown.
Okay.
Mine was, yeah.
Okay. Well, that was just. I don't know if there's any more, but I have them typing it in here, but I don't see any. So let's go. We have a few more minutes. We have 4 more minutes. Okay. So, we got to save the planet, George. Time's running out. So, summarize in our next 4 minutes.
The summary is that, bless everybody that you're here and bless your listeners that they're coming down and willing to at least listen to a program that you guys are trying to get information out to wake them up to what's going on and some solutions. The game is, solution is not take from somebody else. How do we affect the planet and also keeping it in balance? In other words, when you go out and make something, how is it affecting the planet? Everything you do, you have to go through the thought processes. And like you say, the best thing I found is, like I say, the 3 books, the Handbook, Embracing Rainbow and Becoming, Secrets of Light by Walter Russell, who was receiving it from Germain, and of course the Spiritual Laws, which is really an incredible book. Now that was from Christ himself, Sananda, Saint Germain, and anyway, the authors there, when I got involved with that, changed everything, because from a spiritual nature, we start looking and see how all these kids that run down to the thing based on, biblical references, they're in trouble because they've all changed them so much.
Right. So you're saying be aware of your carbon footprint. So what would you recommend that an individual do to reduce that?
Yeah, everything that you do is affecting the planet. Everything. Right. And when you're looking at, the programs that are down there teaching you a little kid, we get kids that are coming out right now, fortunately or unfortunately. They can run these computers when they're 2 years old. It's unbelievable.
So you think that's a negative or positive aspect?
Well, remember, we have to remember when we tune in to the creation itself, we can get all knowledge. That's the whole game. But then we're doing it the easiest way and make ourselves, needing something else to do our work for us to understand why. So it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But we all have a challenge. The challenge is for you to get more listeners. The challenge is for me to get information out to people. I'm still out lecturing. I don't lecture as much as I used to be, but that's because of the time right now. And I'm right now is trying to keep people in balance.
Right.
And understand it, and economically they're going to get rid of the dollar. And I have a lot of people call me on what to do with the dollar right now because it's going to go away. So I share when they, just email me and my, website. I'll get back with them and I'll give them some suggestions. They can do whatever they want to. Right. The best thing is to make hay slowly and also don't bring yourself to any big connections out here. Try to be invisible in the crowd. That's all.
Oh, okay. Don't put your head above the crowd. Here we are, radio. We're not listening.
Okay. All poppies get.
Okay, we got like 1 minute, George. What would you like to tell our listeners before our music comes on, the exit music? Your website is nohoax.com. That is NOHOAX.com, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and people are welcome to write you, and that you will get back to them. You're so sweet. And where do they have is there like a form they fill out on your websites?
No, they can they'll find ways to get a hold of me. We got telephone numbers and we got stuff on. There's a way to do it, that's all. My personal email is frankly global@nohoax.com. And I'll just, because we're thinking about the globe.
Yes. All right. And that's the end of another vision. What are you going to say, Scott?
Oh, just guess this Satan Claus thing. It is so far out, Satan Claus. Tune that one in.
Go read that and have a happy holiday. And George, stay.
Have a happy.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. It's been a great show.